Good evening, Australia, and welcome to the second night of debates, bringing you candidates this time from New South Wales running for the Senate. Again, the reason we're having these debates is because the mainstream media refuses to cover these minor parties and independents who are running in these freedom-focused platforms. Avi?
Well, thank you to the candidates, and I will thank him personally for travelling here to Melbourne, but thank you to the viewers last night who shared last night's debate. And to those who are supporting what we're doing here at ozdecides.com, there's plenty of stories in this. We're giving platforms to candidates like this that the mainstream media refuse to air. So go there, check out the stories, check out the debate, share them far and wide. And if you're willing and you're able, please help us fund things like this at ozdecides.com. Every dollar counts. And I reckon we can get straight into it.
Yeah, let's get started.
Candidates, if we can all take a position at the podium, make sure to have your beer with you, because tonight we're checking if you pass the pub test. That's why we're doing it in the pub. Do you need me to pour you a beer?
Yes, please.
There we go.
I don't want a beer.
You're a healthy man, I know.
Right, I just want to
Hold on, there's only a little left, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the tap myself. This is great. This is on the spot. I'm probably going to get in trouble for stealing from the pub, but just...
That's pretty good.
Holy crap, I did it. And that's how you pour a beer, because I'm Aussie and I know what I'm doing. Thank you. That was a fluke. That's all right. That's not too bad, yeah? Thank you. There you go. All right, so we're going to go through the house rules to begin with.
Yeah, we'll start off with the house rules, Avi.
All right, so firstly, I want to thank each and every one of you. I know we're in Victoria, although, you know, it's always a blessing to come to Victoria from New South Wales. Maybe not in the last 2 years, but we appreciate that you've travelled here. Last night we had a panel that were here in Melbourne, and tonight it was just easier to run it here. So really appreciate the fact that you're here, and I recognise that we're missing one group that pulled out today, which was the UAP. Unfortunately, couldn't make it, but we've got some great candidates up here. We've got everyone else that I think is well known in the freedom movement. So we're going to run through the house rules. This is a friendly, respectful debate, so nothing like we saw on the clown show a couple of nights ago on mainstream media with him and her. Her and here. Am I allowed to say that? I think so. Roles are, Rukshan is the moderator, and let's hit it up again. We've accepted this last night. I'm the agitator, okay? So that's my role. But you listen to Rukshan.
So you can both ask questions.
We can both ask questions. We can interject. We're going to get to that. So you're going to get a minute intro each to begin with. And then the first question is going to be asked there, and we're going to move each time we ask a question, or Rukshan's going to be asking the questions. He's going to start at the next person to the right, so everybody gets a chance to be the first and last to answer questions, even though I'm sure you would answer the questions best every time first, but we'll give the others a chance to shine. 1 minute answers to each question. If somebody interjects, so if you want to interject, just let Rukshan know by raising your hand. Wait till the candidate has finished speaking. You'll get 30 seconds to interject, and then they'll get a minute to answer you back. Clear? Now, moderators and agitators can interject at any time. That is the perk of running this event. It's a power trip we're going to enjoy. Probably me more than Rukshan, but... And at the end of it, we want each of you to ask one candidate one question. So think of it through the night, or if you have one, you're ready to go. One question to another candidate from you, and make it hard-hitting. Why not? Use the opportunity. It's a debate at the end of the day. Then you're each going to get a 2-minute closing where you sell your pitch. We will ask one individual. So the questions that Rukshan's going to ask through the 7 questions or whatever is going to go to each one of you to answer. Then the final question is going to be an individual question tailored to each candidate. Are we clear? Any questions?
All good.
It's very hot.
I'm just wondering, is it fine that Kate's at the end? Do you think it should be mixed up to have
Why
the
is that?
lady in the middle of it?
Wherever you're comfortable. I thought maybe somebody else identified as a woman. I didn't want to jump to any. I didn't want to assume anyone's gender, sir.
No, she's very much the lady, I'm sure.
No, I'm sure she's the lady. I don't know, maybe John.
Yes, well, I identify as a male.
Okay.
Now that the order's changed, we'll start with Matthew for your introduction.
Okay, all right. Thank you for inviting, and it's good to see some people who I'm getting to know. The freedom movement, it's become quite a community. It's great to see. We are the resistance. Yeah. The thing that I have really has inspired me most about the freedom movement, and I've been in this a long time, is the resistance seems to be a self-organising phenomenon. It gathers the people that it needs, the skill sets that it needs, and it's come together over a couple of years that I've seen to become quite a force that we now have an opportunity, a rare opportunity. With crisis comes opportunity, but we have an opportunity to establish a beachhead into our parliament, a beachhead of freedom, a beachhead of sovereignty, and a beachhead where everyday people can get into that parliament. This is the extraordinary opportunity that we've been given. I didn't say too much about me, did I? I'm a lawyer in New South Wales with AFL Solicitors. I've been in this fight a long time. Prior to being a lawyer, I was a soldier. Okay, freedom means a lot to me, and what I've come to know about the people that have come together is what drives them. The common unifying theme is protecting our country for our kids. Okay, so that's why I do what I do, and I'm getting the minute up, eh? Right, it's always hard to go first.
Kate?
Oh, thank you, Matthew, and Michael and John for all coming along, and Rebel News. It's great you've given us this opportunity. My name's Kate Mcculloch, and I'm standing for the Senate for New South Wales, Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. And I'm doing that because there's been a lot of effects the last 2.5 years, but now we're coming out of this COVID. There's so much that needs looking at, and I want to be part of that. I want to be a strong person for New South Wales regional representation. That's what we need in New South Wales. We have infrastructure requirements, we have medical, we have aged care facilities closing down. It's in Bombala, a little town. You might know if you've ever travelled New South Wales, it only shut very recently. There's a lot of concerns in New South Wales, and I'm happy to be here with people who think alike, okay? And I'll hand over to the next one.
Thank you, Kate. Michael?
My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm the founder of the Informed Medical Options Party and also the Senate candidate in New South Wales. I'm a father of 8. I'm a grandfather of 23. I started the party originally in response to No Jab, No Pay, which I felt was a breach of our constitution and our natural inherent right to be able to choose what goes into our body. I always said back then that if we allow this to happen in our children, it's only a matter of time before they will come for us because they have breached.
To clarify, no jab, no play.
No jab, no pay.
Okay.
Yes. So no jab, no pay was when they penalised low-income families. If you didn't take the vaccination program, you lost your Part B of the family payment, you lost your right to go to childcare. So we felt that this was a massive breach of our constitution and human rights. And so I see that we're the actual original anti-mandate party. We've been going for six years as a registered party, 7 years in total. So we're still very passionate about this. The current crisis that we've lived through for the last 2 years has only manifested all our worst fears, and we're up to the fight. And this is our main thrust, to give people back their rights and give doctors back their rights to be able to be doctors again and give advice on their knowledge and not on government policy.
Thank you, Michael. John?
Thanks, Rukshan. Thanks, Avi. Thanks, Rebel News. This is a great initiative. Hopefully it can become a tradition in Australian politics. So look, I'm John Ruddock. I'm the Liberal Democratic candidate for New South Wales. We all agree that COVID was overhyped about 20-fold for whatever reason. We're coming out of COVID now. We've got massive economic challenges. This inflation is just the beginning. Now, why? I'd ask people to consider voting for the Liberal Democrat because I was pretty much the first public figure in this country to come out and say we are dangerously overreacting to COVID. I was going on and on about this in February 2020, in March 2020, when other people, senior journalists and senior politicians were sending me private messages saying, keep going, John, I don't have the guts to do what you're doing right now. So I did see it early on, that what we can all see, and I'm not saying the others didn't, but I was speaking out about COVID hysteria. Now, if we've got to come up with a solution, which is, we need free market reforms to fix up the economy because the economy is in big mess. The Liberal Democrats have for 22 years supported economic freedom, reducing the size of the government, reducing taxation. Australia desperately needs the Liberal Democrats' Freedom Manifesto right now.
Thank you for your introductions. So the first questions, I'll start with Matthew. You're standing as a candidate for the Senate on a freedom platform. You're definitely talking the talk, but how does the voter know you'll walk the walk if elected?
Well, Rukshan, if you look down that ballot list in New South Wales, there's some very good candidates, okay? But I'm the clear standout in terms of fighting for freedom. I've got the runs on the board, okay? It's what I do, it's what I have done. I've stood in defence of this nation as a soldier. I've stood in the courts in defence of our fundamental rights as a lawyer, and the people of Australia, particularly New South Wales, can be assured that I will be fighting for fundamental rights. Now, Michael's touched on some constitutional law about the no jab, no play. Okay? No one knows more about that law than I do. I was there writing to the Prime Minister before COVID hit because I could see what was coming. Coercive vaccination policies. I agree with Michael. They are unconstitutional. They are unlawful. And I have developed that law over the last 2 years. We took it to the New South Wales Supreme Court. They are very scared, the Commonwealth are very scared of that provision in there, section 5123(8), the prohibition on civil conscription, being given its full interpretation and full effect. They are completely scared. Now, we're in the High Court, okay? So this is my fight. This is what I do. I'm not attached to being a senator at all. Realistically, I've got no chance. But my job here is to bring fundamental ideas about change to the conversation. After this election, I've got plenty of work to do as a freedom fighter. If the New South Wales people do elect me to the Senate, they can be assured that I will be in there fighting tooth and nail.
Thank you, Matthew.
One more point. I mentioned a beachhead, okay? That's the opportunity here. What we've got to do, we've got to put the right soldiers in the landing craft to get on that beach. That's me.
Thank you. Kate.
Well, that's a very easy question because I'm with Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party, and Pauline has been probably one of the most outspoken of all senators about freedom of speech for a number of years. That's how she came about. She left the Liberals over freedom of speech. She was put in jail. She still fought back, and she's still fighting back for every Australian today. And I will proudly stand by Pauline, and she knows I'm that sort of person. I stand up for what's right. I will stand up for the farmers. I will stand up for the individuals, for school students, for pensioners, and everyone that's been in lockdown. These mandates must stop. We have to get back on track. We have to go back to our true Australian values. And I'm just such a proud Aussie. I just love the down-to-earth things that we've been able to do our whole life. And now we're seeing it coming into our schools. You know, like there shouldn't be politics in schools. It should be a place where kids go to school. They're not taught terror, and you know they're living in terror. They think the earth is going to end, and now we're bringing in gender fluidity into schools. Let's get back to basics. let's keep our freedoms and let's just teach people that it's a happy place, okay? Australia's the most beautiful place in the world. And I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of our party, and I'm so proud of our Senator Pauline Hanson and Senator Malcolm Roberts, because they've kept fighting, and I want to be there to help fight with them.
Just an interjection is, I guess the question, and to be fair to allow you to answer, the question is, what have you done to walk the walk that people are going to believe? You've been talking the talk, so you're saying.
Oh, okay.
What have
Yes.
you done that the vote is going to believe after
Freedom
they
of
elect
speech.
you, not
Yes.
Pauline, they elect you, that you'll actually follow through with everything you're saying?
Okay, well, I'm a farmer. Not only a farmer, I am a business operator. I run a catering company, and in my catering company, I train individual staff, and I always listen to my staff, and I give them opportunities to give their points of views, you know, on things, on learning and teaching, and I want to give them the best opportunities that they can have, because hospitality is a stepping stone to a lot of industries, and a lot of people won't give them a chance. And I have been around a long time in business, and I'm for business, and I'm for people to have rights and views.
Kate, can I ask, how many freedom marches have you attended in the last 2 years?
One, Freedom March, yes.
In Albury?
No,
In
in
Sydney?
Canberra. I went to one.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Anyone want to add anything? No?
Yeah, I do. This has been a very, very difficult 2 years, and everyone has been confronted with something completely bizarre and unforeseen. And everyone has had to navigate these bizarre circumstances in their own unique set of circumstances. And the thing that will unite us past this is respecting each other's capacity or what they had to do to get through, okay? So that's what I'd like to say.
Thanks, Matthew. Can I just add to that? I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I run a farm 7 days a week, and in between that, I run a catering company, which I go there and I've got a lot of staff, and I'm in transit like in the early morning hours of 4 a.m, and my staff know this, and I get to my job and then I head back in the middle of the night. I basically work around the clock. You can ask my family, I'm a workaholic, but most importantly, we've got 4 children, and I'm there every step of the way for them. It doesn't matter what time of day.
Thank you, Kate. Michael.
I've been very much involved in this fight for freedom, for bodily autonomy and the rights of men and women for the last 7 years. I've always had a very keen interest in freedom. I read a lot. I love to read books about history and so forth. But I've been unremitting in the last 7 years. I've given my heart, my soul, my money. It's cost me. My wife is a naturopath and a nutritionist. They came after her when I got into politics to try and quieten me. She's lost her registrations and had to move offshore. They've come after my business a number of times. I'm still getting questions to this day. I've had to liquidate one business because I am a business person, but all this is of no account to me. To me, it's rather irrelevant. It's just part of the fight because there's no easy path. So the question is, what do I bring to the game? I bring a common sense, I bring passion, and I'm 65 years old. I have a lot of energy. I understand how the nature of the forces of evil that are against us, and I am I can only put down the course in the last 7 years that I have not taken a backward step in this fight in that time.
John?
Look, Rukshan, it's a really good question. I've known dozens of good people who I thought were really principled people go into Parliament and they lose their principles. I've seen it time and again. So how can I tell you that that's not going to be me? Look, I've been to every Freedom March in Sydney. I've spoken at most of them. I've had the cops knock on my door and fine me. I've had endless abusive phone calls and social media posts because I have been outspoken. And the truth is this, COVID was good for my business. I work in property finance, okay, and I was up till 3 o'clock in the morning often when they crashed interest rates, and it's been nothing but harm. There was no harm to me personally, but I was furious and irate about it from the very beginning because I knew that millions of other Australians were going to suffer in the short term, and we're now going to suffer in the long term. So look, I wrote a book a few years ago called Make the Liberal Party Great Again. It was all about getting rid of the factions out of the Liberal Party. I was taken on the establishment then. I was intending for that to be a 10-year project. I wanted to bring democratic reform to the Liberal Party. I had to give up on the Liberal Party after they gave us the COVID police state and the forced vaccinations. So I gave up on the Liberal Party, but I am an iconoclastic person. I'm not going to let you down if I happen to get elected.
Do you think, though, that essentially the fact that you attend, because I know that was the interjection, the fact that you attend all those freedom protests, that makes you the candidate that people should vote for when you say in your own words you had it pretty good? So it was easy, potentially not as easy for the One Nation candidate here, Kate, to do the same.
Well, a lot of people in my position where it didn't harm me personally just sat in bed, okay, even if they were sympathetic to it. But I feel as though I was putting myself at risk, okay. I had lots of little personal problems, I can assure you of that. Had clients complain, had people at my kids' schools not happy about it, okay. But I said, look, the easy thing for me to do would be to do nothing. Sit back, work hard in the business, not worry about it. But that was never an option. I always thought, look, this is a dreadful moment in Australian history, and if some people don't step up, it's only going to get worse. So,
sorry, are you saying that I didn't step up? Because I've had also, a father in aged care. I phone there all the time. I try and go there all the time, and even now there's COVID in my father's aged care, and it's actually heartbreaking because he's locked up. He's been locked up for the whole time of COVID. With little bits of times we could go in and visit, and I could take him out early on. He's been in aged care for 2.5 years now, and I just feel that the memories that our family are missing with their own father, like my time constraints, I've put a lot into trying to make it better for everyone. In all my children going through what they've gone through in this. It's been hard.
Is that a question on this?
Yes.
Well, look.
I'm just sort of telling, just
yeah, well, look.
Everyone's got different.
My father died in 2020 in the middle of COVID. My mother is now in a nursing home. Okay, so I've got a young family. I've got a busy business. We're all busy. I was curious. It wasn't an attack question, Kate. I was curious because I haven't heard of you before. Okay,
really? That's okay.
I haven't seen you on social media. I haven't seen you in print, and I hadn't seen you at Freedom much. So I was wondering. But I know you don't live near Sydney. I'm in Sydney, so I thought you might have been coming to Melbourne or something. So that was the origin of my question.
Okay.
30 seconds there.
Yeah, this comes to my point. We've all lost some skin. We've all got some grazes, some more severe than others through this. Okay, what we need to do now, with our opportunity, is to focus on preventing it ever happening again.
Yes.
Yeah, well, but to be fair, we're here tonight, obviously, for the voters out there that, are looking at all of you as potential. These are people that are sympathetic to the idea and they're looking at freedom-focused candidates, and they want to know what order to put you in. So, whilst I think everybody here are friends, it's your chance now to tell the voter and make your case as to why you should be the number one.
Yeah, and I think the voters will be well served to consider who understands how come COVID happened and who understands how to prevent it from happening again.
That's a good point.
Well, that leads into my next question, which I'll start with you, Kate.
Have you shown him the paper? How does he know about that?
He was floating around here.
Is that extra money you had in your pocket?
Kate, it seems we're nearing the other side of COVID, but we're being told the next big crisis is climate change. If elected, what will you do to protect the community from overreaching government policies and regulations put forward in the name of saving the planet?
Okay, that's a big question, a few choices there. With climate change, climate has been changing for years and billions of years, okay, continually changes all the time. What I'm concerned about right now is the false information out there, the non-scientific investigation into this, and the effects on the consumer right now. Like, people don't even realise it's happening, like subsidies to your electricity bill. You know, for the subsidies that are going to our to the greenhouse, it's like 39% of your electricity bill. These things are issues. And in the future, already Labor announced 2 days ago that they're going to get rid of our livestock, our sheep livestock trade. That's worth $92 million, sheep livestock trade. What are we all going to, how is the world going to eat? But this is all part of their agenda. This agenda is about globalisation, and I don't see it any other way. And the ones that are making the big money out of it are people like in the parties currently sitting as independents. Now, who is running these independents? I thought an independent was a person that wasn't influenced. Yet we have billionaires that made their money out of coal that are operating on an agenda. And I'm going to be the one that's standing in there and making people be honest and upfront and truthful and telling them what it's actually going to cost them, how are you going to fix it? No, they need people that want to stand up to them.
And I'll do this for all of you, that just to give you the chance to really answer the question. The question is, doesn't matter which side of the climate change fence you sit, we're being told, just like we saw through COVID, that we have this crisis that we're going to have to curtail all your freedoms again. So it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not, whether it's scientific or not, is irrelevant. What would you do if elected for that specific issue? So I don't know if I can hear you're arguing the climate science.
Yes.
We can also do that. We did that with COVID as well. That's not necessarily an effective way to protect our freedoms.
Oh, okay.
What would you do practically if elected?
Well, we need to have safe, secure electricity. So we need more coal-fired power stations. They're building them overseas all the time. We have to discuss options too, like uranium. We can't just bypass this. What hypocrites are our government when we sell uranium overseas, yet we cannot even have an open discussion about using it as a power source. You know, these are options we have to look at because we have a reliable fuel right now.
Same question to you, Michael.
It's very interesting because in all the narratives that we receive as the general public, there are a lot of hype. If we look at the reasons we went to Iraq, it was all on weapons of mass destruction, and this was basically, to go against that was to be out of your mind. And so we went to war on that. Then we had COVID, we went to war on that. So what would I be doing if I was elected as a senator? My primary concern on this and any issue, what is actually the truth? What is the scientific truth, not the hyped media inflammatory things? I wouldn't be seeking guidance from Greta Thunberg. I would be wanting to know there is a truth in here. There's always a truth in every argument. And it's our job to flush out that truth. And no matter how unpopular it is or popular it is, it doesn't matter. It's our job to fight for the truthful position in anything. So on climate change, it's no different to any other issue. There's two different sides, there's two different narratives. What is the best interest of Australia and the way we approach it? Are we going to just utterly destroy our economic base by implementing some green ideas? Well, I would think, no, that would be rash and irresponsible to immediately launch into this if the science proved that was the only way we're to go. We have to, there's a twofold thing of protecting our financial base, the prosperity of our country, as well as in looking after our environment.
So again, same sort of thing. I understand that, and you make some really valid points there. But on a practical level, how would you get to the bottom of the science? How would you ensure we get to the truth?
Well, obviously, if you're in Parliament, then you're going to have access to a lot of very good scientific minds, and you're going to have access to the truth. And that's what I'm actually saying. And you're in a privileged position in there where you can command You'll have access to university, to all angles, because on every narrative that comes out, whether it be in universities, there's two sides. And for instance, in COVID, we've only accepted one side of the COVID narrative.
But they would argue that they had access. Daniel Andrews here in Victoria had access to the brilliant mind of Brett Sutton. And look where that got us. So what practical measures, and I'm only asking it to give you the opportunity to tell us, or to tell the voter, I'm not a New South Wales voter, but to tell the New South Wales voter, what would you do to implement this great idea that you have?
Okay, well, I'm not sure what more you're wanting me to say, Avi. Because
how do we ensure it's not the bad? How do you ensure the Brett Suttons and the Greta Thunbergs are not directing our policy when it comes to combating the threat of climate change?
Well, because they're not following a truly scientific position, so therefore they can be negated. Brett Sutton is not a credible authority on. And there are many more credible scientists and people on this subject, and we ignored them in the face of the fear and a World Health Organization narrative, which would take me to another area.
So would you be legislating to ensure that the other voices have a stand? Is that where?
Well, I don't know how you.
I don't either know.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd legislate that. You know.
How do we ensure?
Then you can legislate that only they can have a voice. I feel that all sides have to be listened to, and as a voted representative of the people, then it's my responsibility to listen to every view that's out there.
Okay.
And make a decision, and also to come to have cooperation with, if John was in, if Katie was in, or other senators, and we would come and we would nut out the truth. Find people that regard the truth as their highest motive and have integrity, and not be just willing to follow a populist view.
John, same question to you.
Well, look, with respect to the other candidates, I think if we want to enter public life, we should have already thought about the science. I would stand 100% with the magnificent Malcolm Roberts from One Nation. He's not from my party. I believe it is hocus pocus science. I believe that we've been told since the 1980s that the weather's going to be this catastrophe within 10 years. It doesn't happen. I was around in the 1980s. Nothing's changed. There's always variation in climate. That's how we got to where we are. It's a good thing. And look, we had during the Cold War, we had people in the West were saying, oh, communism's actually a good thing. Well, then communism spectacularly collapsed in the late 80s and the early 1990s. So what did the people in the West and left who'd been promoting communism do? Did they come out and say, oh, we were wrong all along. We should have supported the free market. We should have supported democracy. No. They just invented a new thing to give them an excuse for a big government, big taxes and control of the people. And that was global warming. Now, we've been at this now for 30 years. There's money making, a hell of a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. People are gouging out of this. And the really interesting thing is, it's exactly the same people who shoved COVID down our throat, who've been shoving global. I don't like to call it climate change. I like to call it what they originally called it, global warming. Now, they had to rebadge it because it's not getting hotter as they predicted.
But again, I think it goes back to what I did put to them is, let's say we agree with you, and some may say that I do agree with you. It may be alleged that I agree with you. But what's a practical response? What will you do?
What we need to do is what Malcolm Roberts and others were doing. Look, I wrote an article last year in The Spectator with Ian Plimer, a 2,000-page essay on Al Gore, which I encourage you all to read. Look, what we need to do is we need to educate the public about the reality first. If we're going to, then when there's the political will, the parliaments will follow. Now, I reckon at the moment about 60 to 70% of Australians have fallen for the global warming BS, the hocus pocus, because the corporate media shoves it down our throat. But there's about 30% of people, 30 to 40% of people would be to some degree sceptical. Good. Well, we need parliamentary leadership to get that, to switch that. So we've got 70% of people say, yeah, the same people misled us about COVID are misleading us about global warming. Once we've got the people on side, that's when we can start to reverse. Now look, the Liberal Democrat policy is simple. We're not saying we're anti-renewables. If they can make the solar farms work, great, okay? We are above, all of the above options, including nuclear. We want all energy sources to compete in a free market. We want the government out of the energy market, and we'll see what the winner is.
Thank you.
But just again, interjection here, you keep referring to Malcolm Roberts, who has been very vocal about this issue, trying to educate, exactly as you say, what's going to be different if you got elected, trying to, bang the same drum that Malcolm Roberts has been doing for a few years now.
Well, look, what I've admired about Malcolm is that he does talk to fantastic scientists all around the world, gets these fantastic journals, and these are people that the corporate media is ignoring. Ian Plimer is just one example. I'm going to do what Malcolm does so well, bring it to the public's attention. Say, look, there's two sides of this debate. Have a think about it. But we can't go in there and change the laws immediately because Liberal and Labor and the Greens have fallen for this fallacy. So we need to get the people, and most of these politicians will just go along with the polls. If the polls change, then the policies will change. I think we can win this. I think COVID has actually helped open people's eyes about how deceptive authorities, corporate media and the government can be.
Thank you. And same question to you, Matthew.
Okay, like there's a lot in this question and a lot contained in the responses. Now, I mean, the common theme is an invisible enemy to abrogate one's rights, whether it's the weapons of mass destruction, the war on terror, COVID or climate change. Now, I have a degree in earth sciences. I worked in the Department of Climate Change. I ran a solar company. I know a little bit about this space, and I would say that you cannot talk about climate change without also talking about geoengineering or weather modification, those kinds of things. The common theme here is, great word, agenda. I use it all the time because we do face an agenda. It's the World Economic Agenda, and when you take Liberal blue and you take Labor red and you mix them together, you get Klaus Schwab purple, okay? We are facing an agenda. They call it an agenda, so I call them the agenda. They call it Agenda 21, Agenda 30, Agenda 50. Now, what am I going to do? This brings it to really, what COVID illustrated is that we do not have a circuit breaker on rogue government. The Australian people, over decades, by the agenda, the Klaus Schwab purple, has been dispossessed and disempowered. And this is what the freedom people, the freedom movement has to do if we make that beachhead into the parliament. Now, the fundamental things that need to happen. We have a constitutional monarchy. It can work. We have a Westminster system of parliament. It can work. But we need some fundamental changes to protect ourselves, to restore that balance that should be where the people are sovereign and the parliament is the servant.
Thank you, Matthew.
These guys each had a question. I've got some really important points. Okay?
No, I've given you some extra time as well. But
okay.
Yeah,
well,
you can have 20 seconds.
All right.
Finish it off.
Well, there's some fundamental changes, and so I don't have much of a chance of getting a Senate seat. So my job in this campaign is to bring these fundamental changes into the national conversation. Okay. We have QE2 in the news at the moment. Vacating, etc., etc. I'm not saying that we should depart from an anachronistic, gene-depleted family as our monarch. We have an opportunity here to create a new monarch, something fundamental to our constitutional monarchy that can work. And I'm not talking 5 years, I'm talking 50, 100, 250 years, enduring prosperity. That's the opportunity we have here. We change who the sovereign is under our constitutional monarchy. And that sovereign should be each of us individually, each of us collectively, and some ideals as well. That is our paper monarch. The Westminster system of parliament, there is one simple fix that needs to happen, one simple fix: the direct election of the Governor-General. That is the circuit breaker that's been missing in COVID. That's the circuit breaker that's missing with this climate agenda. If the people have in case of emergency, break glass, circuit breaker.
We understand the point.
Yes.
And so we have to cut it. It's been far over the limit. I think try to all of you, get to the point quicker. I think we got the point at the end where you talk about the Governor-General. We probably could have got that in about 30 seconds.
Like I said, it's a big question, difficult to answer all the topics.
We're on limited time tonight, so please keep the answers within the time.
Rukshan, can I just put on the record, I support the constitutional monarchy as it is. It's an odd system of government. It's the most successful system of government mankind has ever known.
Thank you.
Anyone want to add anything to that now? No?
That's a big statement.
Yep.
We're here for big statements.
All right. Ready, Michael. So, Anthony Albanese has promised to tackle housing affordability by the government taking up to a 40% equity stake in Australians' properties to give more Australians access to the Great Australian Dream. Do you think it's a sound plan? If not, what's yours?
We have a housing problem in Australia. No, I don't think it's a good plan. And but one of the core reasons for the housing shortage in Australia is the massive overreaction. Now, I was at a debate the other night, and the Greens proposed that they wanted to build 1 million houses in Australia. That's part of their platform. We can't afford that. We don't need more debt. We need less regulation. Now, I do know that we're dealing here a lot with state government issues, and that's public housing, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it? And a stake in people's homes. That's right. But we have such an over-regulated system that we have priced the Australian housing market out. And before I came here a couple of nights ago, I decided to look on the American real estate and see some of the cities, what they were paying for real estate. And they were paying for a 4-bedroom house. You can get a house for about $220,000 US, which that's probably up around the 300,000, because they have a housing market that is far less regulated than our Australian market. So it's regulation. It's the over-regulation. It's the ultimate nanny state. It's everything. It's like a cancer on this country where we have this enormous public service, and so we need to wind these back. So I see that doing all these initiatives, and we don't need the government to put their hand in the pocket for us. We just need them to get their hand out of our pocket and to let us breathe, and organically the housing market will start to bloom, and it'll make adjustments as land is released and houses are released.
Less of an interjection, just more of a question. Are the Greens planning on using cement for all those houses?
Well, it's a very interesting thing. The question I asked, I thought, I quickly thought 1 million houses, 4 people to a house, that's about 4 million houses. That's getting close to the size of Sydney. Where do they think they'd like to put it? Maybe pop it up on the north coast or the south coast, or maybe out in the Gibson Desert. I mean, you know, how can Australia...
Abbotsford. It's the Greens area.
No, it's a thought bubble that has not been well thought out.
A thought bubble with no thought. Got it.
Done.
Well, look, in about 1999, John Howard brought along a $7,000 first homeowner grant. And everyone said, oh, that's great, that's fantastic. And it was popular, okay? And then having worked in property finance that whole period, I know what it did. It just pushed up prices by about $7,000. Now, since then, there's just been endless garbage state and federal government programs to help the federal government. It's now come to the culmination where the Labor Party says they want to own 40% of our real estate. Now, it's all terrible policy. This is what the Liberal Democrats are all about, getting the government out of the free market. Now, we had a dreadful thing happen 15 years ago called the US subprime crisis, which the whole world is suffering from. We're still to this day. It's now magnified by COVID, all the debt we got ourselves into. Now, that subprime crisis was caused by, in about 1998, Bill Clinton, in the middle of the Monica Lewinsky thing, passed a little regulation, forced the banks to give home loans to poor people. So lots of poor people who normally wouldn't meet bank lending standards got home loans, and the market absolutely boomed for about 8 years, and then it just blew up, and property prices across the United States went down 40%. Now, Albanese's scheme is worse than that. Okay, it's what the government should just learn. This is bad policy. They know it's bad policy, but they think there's cheap votes in it. We need the government out of the housing market, except for land release. Obviously, they need to approve land release.
Klaus Schwab says you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So what are you saying?
Well, I think he's a liar. I think he's Pinocchio.
This is an interjection that may make sense in a couple of weeks from now. No one has any idea what I'm talking about. But if you had a message for Klaus Schwab, what would it be?
I'd say, well, mate, resign and take up gardening. You're a dangerous human being.
Okay.
And let's see how it works in his own life, that he has nothing and is happy. And once he's proved that point in his own life, we might start to consider it.
Right, we'll just bookmark this moment, please.
Matthew?
Okay, so I see that the commercial banks should be taken out of the residential mortgage market. Now, my idea on housing affordability, and it's great that we are talking about it, is access, similar to what we did with the returned servicemen after the wars, access to treasury bonds, access perhaps to the Reserve Bank cash rate. We don't need commercial banks in that residential mortgage market. They're simply a middleman that live off the interest of a $500 billion market. So what we call this policy at GAP is ROOM, residential owner occupier mortgages. Okay, so anyone can access treasury bonds over a long-term fixed interest because affordable housing is essential infrastructure. Okay, that's what we need to conceive here. So while we are on one hand getting people into secure housing, because everything flows from that. There are peripheral social benefits that flow from that. While we are getting people into secure housing, we're also building national infrastructure.
So just to clarify, you're saying the government should lend 100% of the loan, essentially?
Yes, treasury bonds. It's a
so
system.
You want more government than less?
This is fundamental thinking about the role of government and sovereignty of people.
But that would mean until you pay it back, I'm just clarifying, the government will own 100% of your house till you pay it back.
Someone owns your mortgage until you pay that loan off. So
but you're arguing for the government to own it.
Why not? If we've got a government,
that's your stance.
But has this ever worked in world history, where you're basically promoting socialism of the housing market?
No.
Where has it ever worked?
I gave a perfect example. Returned servicemen, they got access to the Treasury bond scheme to fund the war services loans for them after they'd risked their life coming back to this country.
I'm not familiar with that, but I am familiar with a lot of vets, and none of them seem happy with their return service.
I'm a veteran as well.
Okay, so
Closer settlement blocks, I think you're referring to, and soldiers blocks were about...
all we are limited here is by our imagination on how we restore that balance where the people are sovereign over the resources of the Commonwealth and the government is the servant. Okay? That's what we need to focus on. And this is a fundamental... I know that some of these are not easily digestible, these ideas. They'll take a little bit of time.
Well, Victorians, I think, would be, I guess, uncomfortable, to say the least, with the idea of government having any more power over them. They actually prefer the evil of the bank, because the bank, at least, is a commercial entity that you can take to court and you can fight. Whereas, as we've seen through COVID, for example, try taking the government. Has anyone succeeded yet? Has anyone yet succeeded in any court case? And I've been in a few myself, and I've tried, and I'm still fighting, and hopefully we do win. But commercially, it's a lot easier. So what would you say to the Victorian that's listening to your idea, who all he wants is less government?
what we're trying to do here is get people into secure housing. Okay?
How can you do that without government?
Well,
Or is your idea just government? That is, I guess,
how does money come into circulation? How does it come into circulation? So we have this system. We need to adjust this system, but we need to give people access into infrastructure that is essential. Now, if you give people access to safe and secure housing, affordable housing, okay,
not all government, not all money is government as well. You have cryptocurrency today. I think we're going in a different direction, but I think your point, whether you want government to own the land until the property until the buyer, the Australian, the citizen, pays for it from the bonds, from the government.
The role of people that go into Parliament is to bring a philosophy, okay, a representation, okay, and then the nuances and the details are then debated, okay. What we're talking about here is fundamental philosophies, okay, and solutions to housing, which is an essential infrastructure.
We understand all that. My job here is just to clarify so the voter knows what you're standing for. So what I'm, in simple terms, am understanding, and that's what I'm assuming the voter would understand, is that you're advocating that the government is essentially the bank and we cut out the banks.
Access to the Reserve Bank cash rate or Treasury bonds, which is government debt. That's how government debt is done. So what is philosophically wrong with the government being indebted to people to provide something like secure housing? Now, when you've got people in secure housing, you're going to see a reduction in crime. You are.
Look, we're not arguing that. Does anyone want to make a point?
Well, my whole point is how the housing market got to this is there was low supply, high demand, and straight out that pushed it up. Now, I think the other day, Mr Albanese woke up in the morning and said, oh, I've got to make a big statement today. Okay, everyone's worrying about buying a house. So how about we keep 40% of it? This sounds good. If this doesn't work, we get the house. Because you know what? We don't know what happens. Say if, these are in the lower economic, people that he's referring to here. And what's going to happen? I don't know a house in Sydney that he can get for around the money he's talking about. Regional New South Wales, my God, he is going to push the prices up and no one in our regional communities will even be able to afford a house. I think it's disgraceful.
Sorry to interject you, to clarify,
the
candidate next to you is advocating government realistically owning 100%. So
they own too much, sorry. I don't want the government to own any more. They're selling us out.
What I'm saying is creative solutions to get people into houses, okay?
Yeah,
so, Treasury bonds, why do we have to go to a commercial bank and sit there watching the interest?
The advantage of a commercial bank is if you've got your mortgage at one bank, and they're not giving you a good interest rate or they're not giving you good service, it's very easy to move over to another bank. If you've got 200 banks offering a mortgage, there's competitive tension to bring about the best product and to keep customers happy. That is the reality.
Where do they get there?
Well, they get it from savings or they get it from government bonds. There's lots of different sources. But the point is, customers are getting a good deal, okay, because there's the competitive tension in the free market is delivering that.
Sorry, excuse me. Do you think they're getting a good deal off the banks?
So you're
I don't think they're getting a good deal off the banks. Look, the other day I went in on Friday, I went to the bank on Friday to check. Just to check, I was curious. I'm a very curious and receptive person. I like asking questions. And I said to the bank, hey, okay, say if I had some money saved, what interest are you going to give me now? Seeing you put the housing interest up, because I believe yours is now 5.45%. Oh, sorry, United Palmer Party. You told us you were going to keep it at 3%. Okay, that one went out the door. But no, they haven't put the interest rate up for money if you've got some savings. They're not looking after us right now. No way,
but
sorry.
Look, there's 50 good banking institutions in this country, if not more. So there's if you don't like one, you can go to another one. Now, they're all at war with each other trying to win your business. There are forces beyond the bank about what those low savings returns. COVID, all the debt that they've created, all the money printing that they've created. It's not the bank's fault. Look, the truth is we do have, the big four banks are some of the strongest companies in the entire world. Now, I know it's easy and it's a cheap shot to take to hit up the banks, but if the last thing you want in an economy is big banks going bust, okay, and we had that in Victoria in the late 80s, and it brought about a hell of a lot of misery and suffering. So I think there should be more banks, there should be more smaller banks, and I don't like the idea of four big banks, okay, but look, it is not fair to, look, hundreds of thousands of Australians work in the financial services industry, and it's generally, we do have fantastic housing in this country. Now, I know it's overpriced, but people, all day, every day, people want to migrate to Australia, and one of the big things they are attracted to is that we do have, on average, compared to the rest of the world, fabulous housing.
Thank you, John. We'll move on to the next question. I think we've explored that topic really well.
The moderator is moderating me now.
John, petrol prices are soaring, raising the already high cost of living for everyday Aussies. What could or should be done to tackle this real-world issue?
What we've had is a temporary halving of the fuel excise. Okay, well, it's been long-standing Liberal Democrat policy to abolish entirely the fuel excise. Okay, now I think Scott Morrison has abolished it for 6 months. Okay, so that was just a cheap shot to get him through the election. Okay, and people did notice it. Wow, the petrol prices come down. Now, beyond that, what can Australia do to, over the long term, have lower petrol prices is, well, we should be encouraging more search for oil in our part of the world, which we're just not doing now because it's a fossil fuel. So we need to have, I think there's a lot of offshore oil that we haven't tapped. Now, we need to get onto that because, I understand that if there happens to be some major world crisis and the fuel doesn't come into this country, we're in trouble pretty quickly.
Just to interject, the fuel excise, where does that money, where's it supposed to go? What does it fund?
Well, it was first invented, okay, to fund roads, okay, particularly in regional areas. Everyone said, oh, that's great, we need better roads. But it's nonsense. The money from the fuel excise just goes into a big bank account called Consolidated Revenue, which is the government's bank account. That's where it goes. There's not a special account. So most of it is just goes to everything else, okay? A little bit of it goes to infrastructure, but it's not the case.
But essentially, it's a tax that goes into the big pockets there, and then it's distributed to whatever it is.
Look, it's just another tax. It's just another tax. Look, what the Liberal...
when you cut a tax, just to clarify, when you cut a tax, you also need to figure out how you're going to save that money that you've cut. How would you...
Okay, look, this is probably one area, an important area, where the Liberal Democrats disagree with our friends in the other freedom parties and the United Australia Party, who unfortunately is not here. This is what we believe, and this is the lesson of history. If you cut taxes, cut the tax rates, you're giving more power to the people and to the private sector. Within a year or two, they start to prosper and boom like never before, and the government ends up getting more revenue. Lower tax rates deliver more revenue in the long term. So this is what the Liberal Democrats are calling for, a flat tax, personal company flat tax of 20%. Okay, and now, now what that will do is, for a year or two, that will put the debt up a little bit. But you watch, the engine of the Australian economy, the entrepreneurs, the people wanting to get ahead, are going to be working a lot harder if they only have to pay 20% tax. There will be new businesses, new innovation, and things will boom, and there will be more revenue for the government with lower taxes. It seems like a paradox, but this is what works.
Does anyone want to...
Yes, you can go first.
I don't know why you say that you're different from us in that area, because personally, we don't have it as a policy, but we certainly lower taxation. We understand I understand personally the engine of economics, and we have one of the most overtaxed, overburdensome and hidden taxes right through our society. And of course, so I'm just saying that correctly.
No, well, look, Michael, I've read your policy platform. I didn't see anything in there about taxes. In the private conversations you and I have had, you do seem like you're fairly libertarian on an economic outlook, so I'm not doubting you. But I mean, the Liberal Democrats, we rave on and on about tax cuts all the time. We're a broken record on tax cuts. That's our big thing.
trying to...
Well, I just have to say, Pauline Hanson was one of the ones that really initiated the government to actually take that 22 cents off. There was a Facebook page going and she had it on media and everyone was signing. There was over 100,000 signatures. And the only thing I've got to say about it, I hope everyone on that night, because I did. I have my phone and all the areas I drive to, I did snapshot. You know how you can look up the prices? And I busted someone. It was 3 weeks later. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not going to call them out now because I told them, I asked for their manager in the service station, and I said, do you realise that you're a big, you're a big organisation and you can get fined millions of dollars for, being out 4 cents because they had time to go down in price.
Is it One Nation policy to cut that tax
entirely?
entirely?
They've got to, yes. This is the money they're bringing in. Like, it's meant to be for the roads. It's meant to be for the roads.
So it's One Nation
like
policy.
all
So
taxes.
that is the same policy.
Yeah, we sound quite similar, yes.
Yes, very similar.
How do you feel about it?
The taxation, I think people fail to understand that it doesn't create wealth, it doesn't create money. The money circulating in an economy is there. Taxation is a mechanism for distribution, okay? And we're only limited, in our philosophies on how we distribute that money that's circulating. Now, the Great Australian Party, we Liberal Democrats, they don't get that personal income tax is completely unnecessary. It's inefficient. I agree with you, it needs to be cut. But it needs to be more than cut, it needs to be abolished.
Income tax?
Yes,
for
personal
okay.
and for small business. Think about what...
So what are you proposing to replace it?
The current system, the compliance costs, the administration costs, it is...
We understand that. The question is, what are you proposing in place of that?
Well, there's many options to distribute money within the system.
What would GAP, if you were elected and keep it short?
We are looking at transactional taxes because they're simple, they don't need policing, they don't need compliance. They're simple, it's a set and forget, really. You're capturing... So the underlying philosophy here of GAP with income tax, which John raised, is that the person that earned that dollar should be the person that gets to say where that dollar is spent. All income tax does is take that dollar and give it to someone else that didn't earn it.
Well, look, the government needs revenue. We need an army, we need infrastructure, we need courts, we need police. The government does need revenue.
Yeah.
Now, if we're going to have a little tax on every transaction...
He's saying transactional tax.
So that means if I go and buy a beer, if I go and buy a beer at this pub, okay, we're going to have like 20... It's going to like a much bigger GST. Yeah. Now, what are we going to do about cash transactions? It's going to fuel a black market economy, isn't it?
What you fail to conceive is that taxation doesn't do anything other than distribute money within the system.
No, but he makes a point of... His point is essentially, let's use the example, we're here in a pub, does it pass the pub test? If we go to transactional only tax, we'll get to you in a moment, transactional tax, that means then a beer is going to essentially, instead of costing, $5 or $5, I don't know, I just poured one without permission, but let's say it's $5, the beer is going to be $20, then what stops people from using cash to avoid that tax?
What we are looking at here is what doesn't work, okay? The solutions we take and we debate, okay? Now,
but that's your policy. So your policy...
It's not my policy. It's something that we would look at.
Okay.
Our policy is to abolish personal income tax.
But you can't... So the point, I think, tonight is for the voters to understand what you're going to do. So it's easy to walk in and say, the Greens do that a lot. We're going to abolish, we're going to get rid of, we're going to give, we're going to do... all very expensive ideas that sound great. I was sold when he said 20% tax because that's going to save me a lot, right? But I want to know that the voter at home wants to know that there is thought behind that to back it up. Because as an idea, it also sounds great for me to be the king of Australia.
Right. Well,
But-
what you're failing to conceive, obviously, is that taxation doesn't create wealth. It simply distributes it, okay?
Well, the government has expended, it
It
costs
does.
money
And
to
so
run
all-
everything.
we
How
have
would
this
you
money,
fund that?
We have this money, resources circulating in the economy, so those services can be paid for. And we work out
Mm-hmm. How do
what
you
is the
distribute
best
it to
way.
them? So you don't know yet.
That's for debate. That's for detail.
Well, that's what we're here for tonight.
Yeah,
We're
that's
trying
right. So what you do is you bring into Parliament ideas, you bring in philosophy. You don't bring in, no one knows everything. Anyone that thinks they know everything is
No, that's
absurd.
fine, but if you're coming here with an idea of abolishing tax,
That's
you
right.
need to walk in, I would think, with a plan that makes up for the difference. That might just be me. Kate is being
Look,
patient.
I think
I
we're all
think
missing
you're missing
a...
the point.
Let
sorry,
Kate
Matthew.
talk, and then you can come back to you for 30 seconds.
The government needs more money. We are missing out on multinational companies paying their taxes. A good example is gas. Gas sold overseas. Okay, Qatar sell approximately the same amount of gas that we sell. They take about approximately $20 billion. We take about $1.2 billion. What is going on? Okay, it's one of our biggest, we sell more gas than anyone else in the world. And yet we're taking this minor amount. Multinationals are scooping it big time. And that's what One Nation is about. Let's get our money back. They have to pay tax, we have to pay tax, so why do they get away with it? That's billions of dollars that could be put into infrastructure in Australia. It could be put into training our young people. It could be put into, medical. And like one of our best policies for regional New South Wales is our doctors. We need doctors in New South Wales. There are towns that have to travel 150 kilometres. All we simply want to do, they get trained at their university, they sign a contract, they come to regional towns in New South Wales, and then we pay their help, fees and their uni fees. That's it. Done.
30-second comment, just...
Oh yeah, no, it's a great example of where you can look at other places where there's where
the multinationals.
where the Australian people have been dispossessed and disempowered.
So you're agreeing with the One Nation policy of taxing, but that's not transactional.
All I'm saying is we look at that. Okay. Is that a potential to distribute money from?
That's their policy.
What I'm saying about the income tax is we don't need it. It's inefficient, it's inequitable, it's unnecessary.
Okay.
The solution lies in debate and creative thinking, okay?
Well, look. When the taxing multinationals might sound like a good idea, but it's a terrible idea. And I have admired Pauline Hanson since 1996. I was in the public gallery when she gave her first maiden speech, but she is wrong on this issue. And I bet Malcolm Roberts knows that she's wrong. Now, look, when we talk about a multinational, we're talking about a company that might have their headquarters in New York or London or Tokyo, and they've decided to invest $10 billion, and they're going to weigh around the world, weigh up the various countries around the world that they're going to put that $10 billion into. Now, if Australia we say, oh, we're going to tax multinationals more, well, they're going to say, oh, well, let's not go to Australia, let's go to Singapore, let's go to Indonesia, let's go to Vietnam, whatever. Now, if that $10 billion comes to Australia, what does it mean? It means there's going to be a hell of a lot of building, they're going to build new premises, they're going to employ thousands of Australians and all the associated flow-on industries. It means that those employees are going to be paying tax, means that company will get up and going, then they'll start paying company tax, 20% under the Liberal Democrats, and foreign investment has built Australia. Now, I know it's easy to say, oh, foreign investment's bad. No, it's not. And Australia invests overseas. Australia is often the foreign investor overseas. All these things, free international trade is a good thing, and we do not want to deter investment in this country by saying we're going to tax the multinationals.
Thank you, John. We'll keep moving on to the next question.
I don't think I got a chance to answer that question.
You didn't get a chance. There you go. Go for it, Michael.
Okay, then.
We got lost, we apologise.
That's all right.
And that's the moderator's fault.
I got carried away.
I knew
think
where
I
I
did
was
quite
standing.
well as the agitator.
And one of the over-regulation, I've mentioned this before, of Australia, I see as one of the greatest threats to Australia. Business is an organic thing, and I've been in business for many, many years. Business doesn't need help from government, it needs the government out of the way. And obviously, and the government is also the most inefficient spender of money possible. So I actually very much agree that taxation should be shorter, less government. Of course, on the converse, if you're going to have less tax revenue, then you're going to have to wind back. And we do have a huge amount of unnecessary bureaucracy in Australia, so it has to come back as well. I agree with many things that have been said on both sides of me, and probably not everything, but we don't have a really a financial policy at the Informed Medical Options Party, because we have a primary focus on bodily autonomy, and this is our core belief and core thrust through the COVID. But we have, I personally I listen, I study, I'm a business person, and I want to support good initiatives that mean less government spending, less tax, and less burden on Australia, and create an environment where the soil for business to grow is fertile and ripe. Otherwise, it'll continue, and our manufacturing to do what it's been doing for years, go offshore.
Thank you, Michael.
Can I just make a point here?
Sure.
These free trade agreements that are being praised have actually been the cause of homogenisation of our economy, the destruction of trade and manufacturing. We need to have a root and branch pruning of our obligations that we've signed up to under the 70 years of the agenda parties, starting with the Lima Declaration. Yes. I mean, I don't know how many people here understand about the National Health Security Act that was enacted in 2007. That's what binds us to the World Health Organisation's international health regulations. So these are the things we need to cut. So free trade, I don't know that it's all that the sales pitch is there. We need to invest back into communities. We need to restore manufacturing. It's essential for the prosperity of our economy, but also in this world that is in conflict. We need to be able to manufacture to defend ourselves as well.
And that's only will happen if the ground is fertile, that a business person and a company would find us a good place to do business. If we're not a good place to business, we won't manufacture in Australia.
And we have to increase productivity, because everyone, look, Albo promised another 5% wage rise.
It's organic.
Well, if he puts 5% wage rise, everyone loves to get more money, but when that goes up, everything goes up.
So just to clarify, I think that do you have a response to that? So obviously there's a different, this is a big difference that we're seeing within the Freedom Focus Party. We've got one side that are really pushing the taxing of multinationals and don't really want foreign investment. They want to bring back what they're saying, the trade here.
They don't want free trade. So look, I'm sorry, your economic policies are more similar to socialism. What built the British Empire, what has made countries rich since ancient times, is the more trade we can have with it domestically and in other places. We learn from each other. It is prosperity. Countries that have trade with each other don't go to war with each other. That's another reason why it's such a good thing. I thought this debate had been sorted out in the 1980s and the 1990s. The third world in the last 30 years has had an enormous increase in living standards, because they used to believe in protectionist policies. They used to be against foreign investment. Well, in the 1990s, after they saw the success of the Reagan and Thatcher revolution, countries like India, countries across Africa and South America, they said, we want foreign investment, we want trade, and boom. You haven't seen people starving in Africa for 30 years because of free trade.
How do you stop China buying us out?
Okay, well look, when we're talking, it's not free trade if it's a government-owned institution from a dictatorship, okay, so that is a tricky question, okay. Now we've got the Foreign Investment Review Board, which is, I believe it should be more relaxed, but I mean, yes, look, we're dealing with a different situation when we've got a hostile government owning corporations and buying things here.
So there are restrictions around the trade when it comes
Well.
to how do we define that? How do we know? Because that's a moving beast all the time. So I guess when voters are listening to their arguments, they're saying, because I think in most people's minds, voters, they'll be thinking China right now.
Wow.
And, when I want to go buy my house, and I don't want the prices to go up because the Chinese are buying it, or as a company, I don't want to be eaten up by China. I don't want to be taken over by a Chinese company. And today it's China, tomorrow it could be any other company.
Yeah. Look, the biggest investors in this country are the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, and then China. Okay, so we're all happy about American investment. Okay, we're all happy about British investment, which has been coming in here since the First Fleet, and we're all happy with Japan, but it's not the Japanese government coming in here and buying it. Private sector in Japan. Okay, we've got good relations with the Japanese government. Now it's clearly a case-by-case situation with the.
So how would the Lib Dems be ensuring the protection of the potential voter, that to quash any kind of fear that he would become victim of that if he signed up to this free for all?
Oh well, look, I'm not saying that we abolish the Foreign Investment Review Board. So we need the Foreign Investment Review Board. Now we would be, so when it's with most private sector investments, we'd say terrific. You're going to make Australia wealthier when you put your money here. Okay, and everyone's a winner. Now with if the North Korean government wants to invest in this country, the Chinese government, well, I think that it has to have a much higher level of scrutiny, and I suspect in many cases those applications would be denied.
I have to say, it's just wrong that 53 million acres of farming land in Australia is owned by overseas entities. That's 14% of agricultural land. Our water, look at the Murray-Darling Basin, all the water, that's pushed up the prices. Overseas entities should not have a bar of it. We need a transparent water register. That's all I've got to say, because I'm full on.
I'd just like to point out, early on we were acknowledging the global agenda, the lockstep, the coordination from top down, a globalist octopus, if you like, coordinating. It's completely, to think that is not also coordinating the free trade and manipulating right down into community level across the globe, the quality of life. I think there's a misapprehension here. On one hand, we have acknowledgement that we are under threat by a globalist agenda, whether it's COVID under lockstep or some other invisible enemy that's climate change that is trying to disrupt how we even put food on our table, and yet you're failing to comprehend that the same forces draw up
look, I mean, if I want to buy
that you're standing on.
If I want to buy a car from Japan or a car from Germany or America, and that's a voluntary decision I'm making. Now, what we're talking about with the WEF,
your ability to do that,
we're
John,
talking about political interference, which of course we're against that.
Your ability to do that has been designed over a long time. Okay.
Well, I think Australians having better quality cars these
everyone
days.
in the freedom movement, that is something that we are all behind. Sovereignty of Australia.
Of
sovereignty
course.
of our
Political sovereignty, yes, absolutely.
We used to have manufacturing.
But doesn't sovereignty also give you the right to buy whatever you want from wherever you want, to sell whatever you want to whoever you want?
Absolutely. And
that's free trade in the idea.
No, the free trade. That's what these free trade agreements.
I'm not talking about the specific agreements. We're talking about the concept, the idea of free trade, being able to trade. That is.
It's got to be in Australia's interest.
Exactly.
Those ones we're doing free trade deals, it has to be in the interest of the Australian people, not at the consequence of losing any Australian jobs. To put it in simple terms.
Thank you. I think we've explored that topic.
Wait,
really.
Next topic.
this was meant to be the quicker night.
We talk a lot.
All right, this
Can we
question.
have a beer top
Okay.
up?
but-
Yeah,
We
we'll
can.
do a
I think we should.
Since it's at the pub.
Keep filming. We need to do a beer top up. This is an emergency. We didn't do this last night because.
So we're having a break?
No, we're just gonna. I'm gonna hear.
Oh, we're not-
We're capturing.
The
This is actually
question
good.
hasn't been
Go.
asked though of the strategic reserve, the petrol prices and all that. We went on a little bit of a tangent.
Tangent, yeah.
You've got to show like what a legend I am.
Electric cars. We thought they're going to be kilometre.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Be scot-free, and they're not going to.
I've never been called a socialist before.
There's a first for everything. All right, here we go. You want to top up here?
Go for it, Harvey.
Under socialism, this is our shared beer.
I've never been called a socialist. My uncle would be horrified.
Father used to say, water's free and soap's cheap.
Thanks, mate.
I'm a slow drinker. I've already had a Jimmy before this, remember?
Listen, we're not just trying to get you drunk here. Would you like a top up?
Oh, just a little one. Yeah, just
A little one. So 10%, or you're into the 20 or 30%?
No, that's it. That'll do. Thank you.
I'm just riling you up. You just want the whole jug.
Well, I mean, it all depends on how lively you want your conversation, eh?
Listen, we're here to debate ideas and for the voter to be able to know who they're potentially giving the power to. Jeez. Oh, look at him. Look at this. I hope we're catching this on camera. Are we capturing all this? This is what I like to see. You see, trust a man that can drink beer. I trust a man that is also healthy. All right, we good to go?
We're good to go. I think this question starts again with Matthew. Matthew, what would you do to protect free speech, including free speech online?
What would I do to protect it? Well, I guess I would reject, if I was put in that position, reject any legislation that was put forward that would curtail it. Now, free speech is essential to a functioning society. You censor and you end up with COVID. Yeah, you need to flesh out ideas.
So just so we keep the answer shorter, we're all in agreement that free speech is important. We are freedom
fundamental
candidates that are pro-freedom. So we're not arguing whether we need free speech. We agree. What will you do if elected to fight for that, to ensure it?
I will lead by example and I will speak freely. Okay. But yeah, I would just reject any legislation that sought to curtail free speech. We do have the protections at law. Okay, if you say threats or you're going to, do X, Y, Z, we have protections. So we already have that. So there's no need to, roll out the legislative apparatus that just seems to pump non-stop law after law.
Kate?
Oh, well, number one, the federal government put about 28.4 billion into our state education. That's annually, approximately, okay? Well, number one, to keep free speech, you have to start at the bottom. So the indoctrination that's happening in our schools, in our education system, full on, from universities down to preschools, it has to change. And if we don't do something about it and stop all the gender fluidity, number one, all the activists that are against freedom of speech, which start in our universities actually, and then it's continuing down, then we're going to lose it. But we have the likes of Mr. Musk overseas, just bought Twitter. He's about freedom of speech. So I think there is some hope. We can keep it going, but I will never give up on our freedoms. And freedom of speech is the most important thing in a westernised society. And that'll be a fight till the end.
Michael?
What would I do? Well, immediately I because the disinformation bill will be coming up once after the election, definitely be voting against that. That's a bill that is designed to squash dissenting views that the government doesn't approve of. I would also seek to, I think that the entire board of the ABC needs to be dismissed. Ida Buttrose. We have a government-funded media organisation that does not live by their mantra of fair balance. They have lost their way and now have a very clear agenda to promote left-wing narrative. So I believe they need to go so that Australia has a national broadcaster that will have proper fair balance and allow every type of speech, political speech and whatever, and not just one narrative. And we do have laws of free speech, but we have to agitate this in whatever way we can. It's very hard. I don't like to see about legislating anything, but I think that there should be some way that people have the right to be able to say something unless it's incitement to war or to murder or something bad like that. Thank you.
A couple of clarifications. What about incitement to violence? Would that be acceptable?
Yes, that's an interesting point. Needless violence, I mean, I think you should even be free, if a government is bad, that we incite people, have a protection to rise up, because we have, what avenues do the people have to protest? They go to they can go to their members of parliament and take something to them. We've been doing that's been rejected. You can go to the courts of law, they've been failing. Then you can go and vote at the ballot box. But if a government became so bad, so dictatorial, so communist-like, then what other avenues do the people have but to face revolution?
Is that anarchy?
I don't want to see that happen. It's revolution, and revolutions in the past there's been peaceful revolutions. There was Gandhi brought out a peaceful revolution. Martin Luther King, largely a peaceful revolution. Of course, the wall fell in Germany and communism fell through a peaceful revolution. But to be able to have the ability to be able to warn, to rise up, to garner your forces.
To warn, but to incite others to act violently, you would be comfortable with that?
I couldn't say an absolute no in every circumstances. I do think that when there's a great evil being enacted upon the people should have a right to respond against that. And I hope I never have to face that in Australia. But for terrorism acts, definitely against it,
For terrorism act?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, maybe for a religious rhetoric, or just a hatred.
So you would ban religious incitement, but you would be okay with potentially an incitement to rise up against the government. So in Victoria, for example, in the last 2 years, you would be okay for members of the public to rise up?
Well, members of the public did. And they did rise up and they urged people to go, not to violence, but to go to demonstrations.
But we're talking about going to violence.
Yeah.
That's the question here.
Yeah.
I think the entire panel agrees on the freedom of speech and the freedom to incite people to go to peacefully protest. Is there a line there that you're willing to go further? You're willing to say that they could rise up to get violent, and you're happy for them to have the right to say that? And if so, what's the difference between that and religious incitement?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm not. I think there has to be protections of some sort against direct harm to people. Revolution in itself, and I've sort of gone into there, and that was more of a theory on my fourth agenda, and I hope we never get to this because we're at point number 3 here, where
a revolution by definition is generally illegal anyways. It's an uprising of the people against the government, so they're going to break the law. So I don't know if you can really legislate to legalise revolution because it kind of goes against the purpose. But my question here, just the voter, I think when they hear what you say, which is pretty inflammatory, are you, if you are elected, will you be comfortable to sign legislation that would protect people's freedom to incite violence, that you could potentially become the target
No, the answer to that question is probably no, I wouldn't be. I would not be comfortable.
And
to
more
say that.
importantly than all that,
Yeah.
when you fire the entire ABC board, who
Yes.
will you put in charge, me or Rukshan?
I don't know. We'll have to have a discussion later and about that. But honestly, we need fair balance back in the ABC. The ABC has betrayed us.
Was there interjection
yes,
that you wanted to do before we moved on?
Yeah, just a little add-on to it, like when we say freedom of speech, we're also discussing freedom of opinion. But most importantly, we would never accept freedom of speech where it's bullying in schools, like children on the internet bullying one another, where, you know, we have mental health issues. Like, I am not for that sort of freedom of speech.
So
you know, like
to
we're
clarify
kids.
here, so you would...
Yes. Like
You're pro-freedom of speech, but you're going to protect...
especially children and internet,
So
things that are said.
how, if you're elected,
Yes.
how are you going to legislate that? What are you advocating to legislate exactly?
Freedom of speech, allowable, but there has to be discussions, and that's what the Senate is about. The Senate is a group of people that are put together that come from, you know, hopefully elected from all different ideas that can work amicably.
That's in the Senate. I'm thinking of time.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm just
let's-
basically
I
saying.
just want to understand the bullying, because you made a
Yes.
statement about protecting kids from bullying at
Bullying.
school.
Yes.
So how would that legislation work to protect kids from bullying in school whilst protecting freedom of speech? How do you do that?
Well, I think it's to do with age barriers there.
So you
know,
stop
you have
children
to be,
from having
it all
freedom of
goes back
speech?
to education.
I understand that, but when we're legislating it, we're talking about
Yes, freedom of
here,
speech.
freedom of speech. But how are you going? Do you want?
I
do you
see
want
it.
the
I
kids-
see it different bullying a child, like an
I'm
incident
saying,
where.
are you are you talking about legislating protection of bullying to children, or are you just? Is that just how you feel?
It's how I feel. Freedom of speech is a big thing. Freedom of speech is freedom of opinion, without for other people to be allowed to debate it with you and talk with you.
And you can
Not-
get offended. The
And
right
yet,
to offend
if-
somebody. Do you
Right
have the
to
right to offend
offend, but not to bully them, not to indoctrinate
that
them
line?
in such a way. Well, I see it. There's a definitive fine line there.
So what
I
is it?
see if someone like I am a woman and someone might take offence to, you know, with what they're teaching in schools now. Like, that's my daughter over there, if I was to say that. You know, I'm getting onto all this gender fluidity and
I understand
and all
that,
this.
but I'm really trying to get down to the...
Yeah,
Well,
like people have to have common sense when it comes to a
I
lot of things.
understand that, but we're
they're
talking about
taking
government.
away
Your
our
role as
total
government.
freedom of speech.
So we're here tonight to debate
Yes.
policies as your role of government,
Yes.
not just how you feel.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people sympathise with how you feel. It is it is hard to watch children bullying each other. It's certainly even worse to watch adults bullying children. My question here is, when you're making those statements now,
Yes.
are you referring to, if you were a senator,
Yes.
you would be legislating freedom of speech with a provision that protects kids from bullying, whether it's from other kids or adults? Or are you just saying, I'm going to make freedom of speech open and
I actually think it's more the opposite. It's preventing the government from taking away our freedom of speech.
Okay.
Okay, so look, I think we're missing the major point here. When we talk about free speech as a political issue, we don't care what rules individuals want to have amongst themselves. If in your household you want to say, I don't want the word orange in my house, or I don't want the word Trump in my house, you're free to do that. If you enter a little restaurant and you say, I don't want the word Albanese uttered in this restaurant, you're free to do that, okay? When we talk about free speech, it's about what the state is going to persecute citizens for saying certain words. Now, there's only one way to protect free speech properly, and that is a constitutional amendment. Now, in the Liberal Democrats' Freedom Manifesto, which I was proud to play a role, we've got a point in there about free speech, and we are calling for a constitutional amendment in the Australian Constitution which would replicate the First Amendment to the US Constitution. The US Constitution was ratified in 1788. It's the greatest political document in the history of the world. Most constitutions around the world today copy largely the American Constitution, now, including Australia. Now, 3 years after that Constitution was ratified, the Americans said, hey, we haven't protected our fundamental rights. So they made up a list of the Bill of Rights. Number one of that is the protection of free speech. So in America, the government can't pass laws banning the citizens from saying whatever the hell they want. And that is a great thing. And now it's difficult to get constitutional amendments through Australia. I believe the Australian people will vote for a US-style constitutional amendment protecting free speech. And that's, if I'm elected to the Senate, that's certainly one of the things I'll be championing.
And just a point of order with housekeeping. Keep it short and don't repeat yourself. You said orange and Trump. We got it at orange. Thank you.
All right.
Look, it's a shame that the UAP isn't here because one of their policies is a Bill of Rights, and I just completely agree that we should. Yeah, I fully support a Bill of Rights. Absolutely.
Thank you. Next question. Kate, we've seen a lack of diversity of opinions in the major parties. Running as a freedom-focused candidate, how will you deal with members of your own party expressing alternative views to party policy?
Well, to tell you the truth, I haven't actually come across party members that disagree with our policies. I've been in the party for a number of years, and we have had our problems at past elections where they have been elected. We all know that. We have nothing to hide. But as far as I'm concerned, when I know Pauline Hanson, and I can discuss anything with her, personal opinions, and she listens. She's a really good listener, and that's what our party is about. It's about people with ideas talking to her and talking, and that's what I call a great party.
Are you allowed to have a different opinion than the party policy?
Of course I have. I've had discussions with Pauline. Our policies are straightforward.
But let me put it to you, if you, after the discussions, you still have an opposing view to your party on a specific issue, can you run with that in your party?
I couldn't say I've had a differing opinion to any of our policies, I'll be honest.
But let's
and that's not lying.
So maybe not you, but another one, and you do mention some other
it's happened, it's happened before. They've got into different things years ago, but right now, at this moment, the last couple of years, we've had a very good run with all our candidates and they read our policies. I think it's more structured now when Pauline Hanson's One Nation takes on a candidate. There's a lot more communication, and I think it has to be.
Are you allowed a different opinion in One Nation? Are you allowed to vote differently? Are you allowed to cross the floor? In One Nation, do you have that freedom?
We're allowed to have, different issues. We have pro-choice on voting, yes. We've had pro-choice on different issues.
So if you get up and you have a personal opinion on us, or your constituents want you to go a certain way that may be against One Nation policy, you're free to cross the floor and do that?
There has been some pro-choice ones. There has been in the past.
So people have crossed the floor in One Nation?
I believe they have. Okay. They've given their opinion.
Thank you, Kate. Michael?
Yes, well, as the leader of the party, we've made it very clear that the party is a vehicle, and we have our primary focus and essentially that what we would consider a mandate if anyone got election, which is informed medical options. We have a very strong emphasis on the bodily freedom, but we've also made it very clear that they have to represent, if voted in, the interests of their people. We have our policies, and people can have a different opinion, and there are very varying opinions on many subjects within the party. There are probably one or two that I know that probably veer more to a little bit left. I probably personally veer a bit right, and so we do allow that. No, it hasn't been tested in Parliament as yet. We're hoping that, but that's been the dialogue that we have, that the party has to be true to their constituents, and also they are a human being and that has ideas. Yeah.
So I think this is a unique situation because you're also the leader of your party, and your party is very focused on one issue, whether that's good or bad. That's for the voter to decide. Yeah. But what you're saying is your party, as the leader, as long as the core policies are kept, the rest of it is left to the individual candidate to go back and talk to his constituents.
That's correct. We've been very clear. We do not want to be an authoritarian party, and the party is more of a vehicle for them, for the people that elect them. Yes, and of course we have our primary focus, and that's non-negotiable.
Look, I've had been involved in the Liberal Party for 30 years. I know people in Labor, I know people in the Nationals. These big parties are not particularly interested in ideas. Okay, now when I joined the Liberal Democrats, like in the major parties, it's all about internal politicking, internal factional stuff, okay? Who's going to win the pre-selection? Who's going to be the next branch president? Now, in the Liberal Democrats, if we go out to the pub or we go out to some event, it is just an ideas fest. It just doesn't stop. Ideas, ideas, ideas. Now, we've got our Freedom Manifesto, which has got 10 major points. There's nothing in there about foreign policy. There's nothing in there about a lot of subjects. It's the 10 most important policies that we believe are pressing at the moment for Australia. So if we had a parliamentarian who felt strongly about an issue that we hadn't discussed, and let's say we had multiple parliamentarians, and there was a difference of opinion on a piece of legislation, and it wasn't in our Freedom Manifesto, we would say, well, it's a conscience vote. Now, if look, who knows the circumstances, we certainly would be very, very reluctant to suspend people or expel people from the party. We're pretty sure when we get a member of Parliament elected, they'll be, pretty credible type of people. And look, I don't even know if the party has a mechanism to expel people, because it sort of would be very much against our ethos, but we would not be hostile to people crossing the floor. Now, if they crossed the floor and it was completely against our libertarian ethos, I suspect that they would not be pre-selected in the future.
On that, so Lib Dems have never expelled anyone from the party?
Well, not over ideas. Look, I've only been in the party for just a year. Okay, I think people in all parties get expelled for behaviour, but I don't believe that's the case for ideas.
There's no one being for crossing the floor, essentially?
No, that's correct, yeah.
Matthew?
So at GAP, what unifies GAP is our underlying philosophy that for the repatriation of the resource, the Commonwealth, to the people. That's what brings us together. We have regular discussions weekly. We're a good group of people. We're just everyday Australians. The issue that you're talking about here, anyone elected from the Great Australian Party into Parliament is elected as a representative of their constituents. Okay? If the representation of that is in conflict in some hypothetical situation with the policies or philosophical ideals of GAP, then there is a green light. The primary purpose of a representative is to the constituents, okay? So if there's a conflict between party policy and representing your constituents prevail.
So you can have non-socialists in, We're just going to drum that one up tonight.
That's cool, mate. Yeah.
They can be pro-bank.
Oh, look, what it is, Harvey, it's about bringing some ideas on fundamental change just for people's prosperity. That's what's important, yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. I think we're up to the next question. Yes. Michael? Should Australia take military intervention in the Pacific to ensure our national security, particularly from threats from China in terms of expansion in the region?
That's an interesting military intervention in the Pacific. So what does that mean? Does that mean assisting foreign nations, or does it mean going in there like into the Solomon Islands now and...
That's probably the best example at the moment.
Yeah. I think it would be a very difficult situation at this moment with everything that's been worked, that's behind the scenes, and they've, a sovereign nation has signed an agreement with another nation for us to think we can, at this point, go in there and have a military intervention. That would, where would that end? I mean, where would that end? How would that have a good end? I can't see it having any sort of good end. Diplomacy obviously is probably lacked here. I mean, the leader of the Solomon Islands seems to be a very interesting guy, and possibly was hard to deal with, but he's made an alliance of some sort with China. We've learned a valuable lesson there. We need to have closer ties with all the other South Pacific nations and forge very strong alliances with them, that this sort of thing doesn't happen in our backyard.
So that's a no.
Yes.
Well, look, Australia has intervened in the Pacific, the Asia Pacific, on multiple occasions. In World War I, there were lots of German colonies in the South Pacific, Papua New Guinea, etc. We went over and intervened there, took them over. In World War II, there was a lot of interaction in the Pacific there in World War II. Timor, 1998, the Solomon Islands in about 2007. So absolutely, we should absolutely send a message that we are prepared to use military force if necessary. Now, I am, not real thrilled about...
You're going to sign up, John?
Well, look, Matthew, I acknowledge that you've served and I haven't served, and so that's a massive credit to you that I don't have.
It's not about me. It's about sending
well,
young
look,
kids
I'm 50.
off
I'm
into
51
harm's way.
now. But the worst is war is the almost the last resort. We don't want to surrender and become slaves. I am concerned about the Australian government and its management of the China relationship in the last few years. Now, I know it's very, very difficult, okay, but I think that Australia did make a mistake with China when the whole COVID hysteria first blew up. Maurice Payne, who is not that bright, went on the Insiders program, and I think she just pulled it out of the air. She said, I think we should have an inquiry into China's role into the origins of COVID. Now, she may well be right about that, okay? But why should out of all the 200 countries on earth that were all dealing with the hysteria, why should it have been Australia proposing this in the first instance, okay? So I think that was a mistake. Now, I think the South Pacific, those people are Christians, overwhelmingly Christian nations. Australia is still a majority Christian nation. We should be having good relations with the South Pacific, and we do. One initiative that I would strongly support, there's no country on earth that supports, that loves rugby league more than Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea wants to put a team in the NRL. It should be a national security imperative to get Papua New Guinea into the NRL because it's just going to cement the goodwill that we have between those countries.
A couple of interjections there quickly. So, is that a yes? You would if
look, Australia is the great power in this part of the world. We absolutely should have it on the table at all times that we are prepared to intervene militarily.
Do you think? Because right now we have the Ukraine and Russia, and do you think that that's an argument that Russia could almost make at the moment? Do you think it's fair?
Well, look, I've been following Russian politics pretty closely for 30 years. Russian politics are extremely important. They've still got 6,000 nuclear weapons. There's increasing talk of nuclear weapons. I don't go along with the orthodox NATO view that Putin is Hitler and we must basically declare war on him and have regime change. I think it's extremely dangerous. Now, I'm not claiming to be an expert on it. I do urge I want to de-escalate this thing in Ukraine. Everybody said after World War II and the Holocaust, they said never again, never again. We could wake up tomorrow morning and a nuke's gone off in Berlin or Paris or London. Well, that's one Holocaust in 2 minutes, okay? So I am normally in favour of the Americans, okay? I have got my doubts about the hawks pushing this situation in Ukraine.
And my other interjection was more involved in your comment, which was, would you go? So, with all fairness, you've served. I've served in Israel. Because I hear that argument often, but I remember when I served, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when we were young and we were in there, I don't think a soldier wants anything more than to be deployed. So I don't know if that argument, is that a fair comment? Because I hear that and I feel like this interjection...
When you're talking about military intervention, okay, you need to be prepared to go yourself.
I'm not arguing that point. I'm
So
not arguing that point, and I'm
I'm
certainly not
just- all I was
supporting
trying
the
to do-
idea of military
what
intervention.
I was trying to do
Yeah.
was illustrate the gravity of the statement. That's all. Okay.
Yep, fair comment.
Well, it's your turn, Matthew. Do you want to elaborate more on?
Look,
on
I agree
interacting
with
this?
John that we are in a world of conflict right now, okay? Whether it's by design or not, or chaos, but we need to de-escalate, okay? That is really important, because who are the real victims of war? And that's just everyday people getting pitted against each other, okay? Military intervention, defence, our defence to get to this point is 70 years in the making. Okay, you don't just come up with a new defence policy on the night of a new event, a new conflict. Defence is about security of our nation. That's our resources as well. So none of this can be looked at in isolation from the free trade agreements. Now, what impact has globalisation, what drive of that is causing these localised and regional conflicts? I don't know the answers to that, but these are questions that need answering so that we can get to a point where we are a world without conflict. Okay? That's where we need to get to.
So just to clarify, you're blaming the free trade agreement for China in the Solomons?
No.
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 So I misunderstood, so clarify.
Yeah,
for
no.
the voter.
All I'm saying is we need to understand what are the underlying drivers, and that was an example.
The CCP, that's probably a big one.
Well, then you get into discussions about what fostered the rise of the CCP. Okay,
We can go there, but as Australia's national security, do you support the idea of intervention there? Yes or no?
Look, if we intervened, we would be in a very precarious position. So I'm not sure that it would be
Do you think
a
we're
wise
at risk
decision.
if we don't?
I beg your
Do you
pardon?
think we're at risk if we don't?
Well, our country's been sold off, and there's a lot of foreign ownership of our resources. And where we are really at risk is we don't have the manufacturing capacity to ramp up for a full-scale war. We just don't. We're reliant on international suppliers. So we're in no position to be starting
So
a
you
war.
think we
and
don't
this is
have
a
the capacity to fight?
That's right, and this is a consequence of decades of disempowerment and dispossession of the Australian people. And I can't help but think it's not by design. Because no one would come up with these policies that have delivered us to this homogenised, weakened society. No one could think of that's a good idea.
Thank you, Matthew. Kate?
No way we should do military intervention in the Solomon Islands right now. They are a sovereign state. They're their own country. We don't have a right to go and tell them what to do. But we do have a right to ask questions, because what's happened in Solomon Islands, this has been going on for years. Just in the last budget, off memory, don't quote me exactly, but I'm pretty sure in the last budget that went down, Mr Morrison has given 40 million for a new embassy in Solomon Islands and also 20 million to pay its public servants there. Now that's just went down in the budget. Within a year and a half ago, I'm pretty sure about 149 million was spent there on infrastructure of roads. Now it's not just there in the Pacific Islands. China have been stepping in to Fiji, all them islands, Tonga, the whole lot. Now, they're stepping in for one reason. They're stepping in because the debt is going to build up so big. What way out do they have? China's going to take over some of their major infrastructure. It's their way in. So what we have to do, we have to look at why. We have to have diplomacy. We have to go in and see, are their current government, are they honest? Do they have integrity? Who's their opposition leader? We have to speak to people in all the Pacific Islands right now, not leave it before China takes them all. Because if it ends up keep going, we're going to end up losing Solomon Islands, we will lose Tonga, we will lose Papua New Guinea, we will lose Fiji. So definitely not military intervention. Let's go and talk.
Thank you. And I think we're up to one of the final questions from me. And I think it's your turn, John, to take the question.
Kate.
Kate? Is it Kate?
said that one, didn't
Who started with the China question?
Started with... Oh,
It was you.
It was up there.
yeah, you started with me.
Started with you, so yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Too many drinks you've had, mate.
This is
many
powerful water.
All right. John,
Yeah.
why should voters vote you number one over the candidates in this debate tonight and those that didn't show up?
Well, look, I like them all, okay, and I met Dominic Martino, the UAP Senate candidate, okay. Now, look, I think what's going to happen at this federal election is that in each of the 6 states, a Freedom candidate is going to get elected to the Senate, okay? That's a good thing. Now, the UAP and One Nation have in the past elected members to Parliament who ended up being, I'll be generous, substandard, okay? And now One Nation has had a few very good MPs, but I would say the majority of them have underperformed. And Clive Palmer's party has not really had, who's been, Jackie Lambie and others. Now, the Liberal Democrats have had less parliamentarians elected, but all the ones that have been elected in the state and federal elections, state and federal parliaments, like David Limbrick and David Lionhelm and Tim Quilty here in Victoria and Aaron Stonehouse in Victoria, Western Australia, they've all been really bright people and really consistent people, advocates for freedom. So we do not want to be here in 6 months' time and think, gee, we elected these freedom candidates and they weren't up to being, intelligent and powerful advocates for the freedom movement. I am convinced that the Liberal Democrats are the candidates that are going to do the freedom movement the most amount of good for the long term.
Thank you, John. Matthew?
Oh, no, well said, John. The difference where Great Australian Party stands apart is we have put a lot of time and effort into understanding the fundamentals of what went wrong, okay? Now, as like I've mentioned, I've stood in the courts fighting for people's freedom. I'll stand in the Senate fighting for people's freedoms. But we understand the fundamental changes that need to be made. I spoke a little bit about the direct election of the Governor-General. Okay, I think this is really important because what that lends itself to, that's where we can house an ongoing commission into anti-corruption. So there's the ICAC that encompasses a lot of policies, a lot of other party policies. Through this mechanism of a directly elected Governor-General is the mechanism for people to table bills into Parliament. So there is your citizens-initiated referenda. So there's a couple of ideas where we stand apart, not only understanding comprehensively the law around bodily autonomy, but the fundamental changes that need to be made so that we can just make some slight modifications and set Australia up for enduring prosperity.
Thank you, Matthew. Kate?
Well, John, I've got thick skin anyway, so I'm pleased you made a bit of a brash statement there, but look, it doesn't worry me. That's why I would be good in Parliament, in the Senate, because it doesn't worry me what people say about me, because I'm going to be a servant to the people, for the people, to have the best outcomes, and mainly for those country people, those people in regional New South Wales. We need to put what's in the best interest of the people in our regional towns, especially the Murray-Darling Basin. So I'm there to look after the whole of New South Wales. And people can say what they want, call me what they want, but I'll still be standing there, and you'll be able to come and see me. You'll be able to talk to me. And that's what it's about, making decisions.
To be fair, I don't think he was calling you anything. I think he was referring to previous.
Yeah.
But again, the question here is, and this is the final question, I just want to give you the real opportunity to answer it, is what puts you above the rest that are here and obviously the UAP that's missing here tonight? Why should the voter now tick number one for you and put them all in whatever order behind you?
Because I'm a farmer, I'm a business person, I've had a lot of experience, I have 4 children, my husband and I do, so I am just the average person down the street who's willing to be there for the people of New South Wales. I certainly do not need a job. I am doing this totally through passion, and that is what is lacking in our current Senate teams, except for, Pauline and Malcolm. They've been there, sitting there, working as servants for the people. And I would love to be part of that team.
Thank you, Kate. Michael?
I believe I'm very tenacious. I've been in this a long time, and I foresaw the problem coming a long time before. We've just gone through the greatest crisis that is in Australia since probably Second World War. So it cannot be undervalued, all the ingredients that were in place to put us through the last 2 years. And I saw it, I understand it, and there are many people in Parliament already and going to be in all the other major parties that can zero in on economic issues and trade agreements, but we are very, very focused on the issues that just put the last 2 years through hell. And I am committed and passionately focused on this issue, that it will never happen again. And I'm also focused on exposing the root cause of why it happened, who compromised their position in here. So I will not be diverted. I will be singly. We have to call to account the people that were responsible for the devastation that had happened. I will want to sever ties with the WHO and do all in my power that I can. I am a good communicator. I get on well with people of all persuasions. I feel that I can make a difference in there, making friends with all the parliamentarians on all sides to be able to take the interest of the people who vote for me, that this will never happen again.
So just interjection, quick question. All those things that you said, do you think you're better than the rest of the panel?
Well, I don't want to say here that I'm better than the rest of the panel because I actually like these people. And I'm just saying...
But the voter here needs to decide,
yeah.
Because hopefully tonight, the point of this,
Self-praise is the most valueless praise. And I find it very, very hard to get too much into this. But I want to I feel that there needs to be a place for my voice in the Australian Senate so I can push this issue that wasn't pushed for years when it was to the children and it was silenced generally in Parliament, and I want to get in there, and I believe that there's a missing gap in that Parliament and I fill that gap.
I'll give you some praise, you're very good. But obviously they need to vote number one to get that outcome. I'm assuming is the pitch that you're afraid to make.
Well, okay. Number one. O for O'Neill. Michael O'Neill, number one in the Senate if you live in New South Wales. Thank you very much.
John's already had his go. He kicked it off.
Oh.
But yeah, look, that's it from me, from the moderating point
We've got the tough questions.
We've got to pass it on to the agitator, yeah?
I'll be honest, last night I knew more of the candidates personally whilst they're from Victoria, and I knew a bit more, so we were able to really tailor some of those Rukshan tailored them last night. But so we've come up with a direct question for each one. We'll start here and we'll just move along. Your party, obviously, I think Pete Evans was a leader of it, or he was the most high-profile personality in it, but he quit. So how, the voter who's watching this, how can they trust the judgment of a party that is so small and so new that the most high-profile person to join it themselves quit?
Well, I'm not sure the circumstances why Pete's withdrew as a candidate. He joined up. I stood in 2019 Okay, so long-standing member of GAP. We've been in this game since the previous election. You know, it's very. You could ring him. Do you want his number?
No. Well, the point here is more the voter would be questioning if the most high-profile and well-known person, whether you agree with Pete or not, he was a big voice within anti a lot of this stuff, and some of it I certainly don't agree with, but he chose to join your party, and then he chose to remove himself. I don't know. I certainly don't know why.
Yeah, neither do I, and I certainly wouldn't pry. But it's funny how, you know, the TGA was all over him, you know, and this is, and I, you know, TGA's fair and square in my sights at this point. A lot of those regulatory bodies we need to really have a look at. But Avi, I can't answer your question, but I'm happy to take another one.
Oh, you only had one.
That was the question.
So, you're known, or some people have I had to go back to my notes. Some people have labelled you as the next Pauline Hanson. When are you dyeing your hair? No, that's not. Pauline is a divisive political figure. Has been for a long time, and it's made it difficult, I would say, in Parliament for her to sometimes get some of her policies across. How are you going to break away from that? So if somebody is considering to vote for you, but they fear that, well, some of your ideas are really good, but your brand might not get things across the line, what would you say to that voter to say, no, hold on, you can have faith that we can get that done? How will you break away from that?
Well, number one, Pauline's unique in herself, and no one could ever copy to be the exact Pauline Hanson. She's just one hell of a person, one hell of a leader, and so proud of her. Me, I'm different. I'm a very curious person. I'm very receptive and have quite a funny sense of humour. That's what you get from having kids. My brand is very similar to Pauline Hanson, I have to admit. I agree with every single one of our policies. It's like everyone is an individual, but we portray our policies probably differently to each other. It is a very difficult question. People that know me as a passionate person. I'll be right out there. I just want to help people, and I love inspiring young people. I'm just so passionate about the youth of Australia. We need to have people in Parliament that want to go out and talk to them and not just be a senator.
So I'm going to cut off because I think the question here is, let's say you've got a great idea and you probably have a bunch of those, right? But as soon as you bring it up, Labor's going to say no, and with all fairness, if I was running, they would say no to me too. But how do you break away from that? Because let's say the candidate next to you put the same idea forward. Labor likely wouldn't just brush him off. They may consider negotiating. How do you see yourself breaking that cycle and getting those policies?
Well, I am a good negotiator, always have been in my business, as a person. I'm a very negotiating person. And the more people we have in Parliament, in the Senate, the more power we have. So that's the biggest bonus about voting me in for the Senate for New South Wales, because already we have 2 in there. And I strongly feel, look what happened in South Australia, the last election over there. I strongly feel we're going to get, if we're lucky, we need a little bit of luck, but if we're lucky, we're going to build up some more power in Parliament, and we will be rational, as we always are. We are a rational party with great ideas, and it's for everyone in this country.
Yes.
Sir, last night your candidate for Victoria was praising your name and giving you a lot of, he was thanking you for the fact that you fought for so long on this issue. But the question that I posed to him, and I guess I'm going to pose to you more directly, is you fought this issue for a long time, and you mentioned before no jab, no pay. Did you? What about? Is that still in play? Is that still happening?
No jab, no pay is still in place.
So that goes to the point. So you've been fighting this issue for so many years,
Yes.
unsuccessfully. What's going to change now?
Well, because we've never had a proper platform. And this is what we want, to have the platform to go in there. We have taken representation to politicians in Canberra to be dismissed, or to have a meeting and it's like, oh yes, 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 oh yes, 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 and we're out the door. We know it's forgotten. So it was my idea that we needed to have political representation for this issue inside the Parliament, and that's what basically the genesis of the idea of having a party. And that's what I've been just working for the last 7 years, because I don't believe success is going to be had from outside. I believe we have to have someone in there completely agitating for the freedom.
It's easier to become the government than it is to fight the government.
You know, we estimate that in No Jab, No Pay, there was 10% of Australians that were against it. That was 10% of Australians that had no political representation. Currently now there's probably 30%, because the whole narrative around vaccines, there's been a whole awakening on vaccine companies and their unethical way they're conducting themselves, their lack of liability, and their lobbying and the whole gamut of things that they do. And so still there's no representation for that issue for 30% of people, they feel. And so I'm appealing to that 30% of people that I will be your voice for that issue. And if you consider that important enough, then you need to consider a vote for me.
John? Listen, you've been at a few protests through COVID. I've certainly reported at many here. One thing that I can say from that protest movement is that they hate the establishment. You come from the Liberal background, you're in the Liberal Party for so many years, you were part of that establishment. You know probably some of the top guys in the establishment. How do we know that you and the Liberal Democrats and everything you're running for is just not Liberal light?
Okay, well, look, yes, it is true that the Liberal Party's won 7 of the last 9 federal elections, and in that time I was a member of the Liberal Party. But Harvey, I was the bad boy of the Liberal Party. They twice tried to kick me out of the Liberal Party, and I only just survived, okay, because I was trying to fundamentally restructure the Liberal Party. I was trying to bring about massive democratic reform. I was trying to have it so that the party leader, like the Prime Minister or the Premier, the parliamentary leader, is elected by the entire membership, 100,000 people, not some dodgy party room. This is how we get Scott Morrison and Malcolm Turnbull, because of the dodgy party room. So I was this iconoclastic revolutionary within the Liberal Party, okay, because I thought I was passionate about better government in this country, and I thought as much as, look, half the time I voted for One Nation or the Liberal Democrats over my last 30 years, okay. I didn't know about IMOP or GAP, but yes, but look, yes. But look, the thing is, I was trying to change it. Now, I had the long-term plan, okay, because I'm committed to this for my life. I've been interested in politics since I was 4 years old, okay. So I thought the best avenue to reform Australian politics is through the Liberal Party. Now, COVID came along and told me, the emergency's on right now. The party which I clearly identify with the most is the Liberal Democrats. They are a libertarian party. I've been a libertarian voice within the Liberal Party for 30 years. So I thought, look, what upset me with the Liberal Party, what was the final straw was, I thought that there was a element within the parliamentary Liberal Party which was pro-freedom and pro-small government. Now, barely any of them spoke up under COVID. Craig Kelly did, Matt Canavan did, Senator Antic, Senator Rennick, barely anybody else. So I thought, okay, this party is just full of professional hacks. We need a fresh start. The party the purest party I agree with is clearly the Liberal Democrats. So I said, I've got all this political energy, I've got to put it into this party, which I think is the best.
So tonight we're they have to ask another candidate a question, and that's where we end. So I think we start at that end and move along.
Okay. John, how do your preferences fit across the community?
Well, look, across the country, the Liberal Democrats and the United Australia Party are proud to be preferencing each other at number 2 in all contests. Now then in the Senate, we're preferencing One Nation and Kate at number 3. Now then, I'm not entirely certain, but I think your point is that we have put the Liberal Party at number 6 on our Senate ballot paper. Now that was not an easy decision. Now why did we do that? I'll tell you why. Because there's about a 1% chance that the 6th preference on the Liberal Democrats how to vote, probably half of 1% chance, is going to come down to the difference between a Green senator and a Liberal senator. And that could be over the course of this next 3 years. There might be some really contentious bill about the disinformation bill or something. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be horrified if my little preference decision made it so we had a Green and not a Liberal in there who would vote against. Now, I have genuinely, it has weighed upon me that we didn't put IMOP there. I've met Michael a few times. I admire him. I've read the policy platform. I did not know much about the vaccine. I didn't know vaccines were contentious until COVID came along. I want you to have a voice in Australian public life. But look, the party made the decision that we will put the Liberals at number 6. It's almost certainly irrelevant, okay? But that is what we decided to do because we would prefer, if it came to that, a Liberal ahead of a Green. Now, Matthew, you have told us tonight twice that you don't expect to get elected. So if you're saying you don't expect it to get elected, I mean, we can't really put you there because then the people who vote for the Liberal Democrats, their vote would have exhausted. It means they would have effectively not have voted in the Senate. That's what would have happened if we'd put Gap at number 6.
Oh, so you preference the Liberals over Gap?
We did, yes.
Kate, did you have a question to ask?
Oh, I have a question for John.
Yes.
Like-minded people. Okay, what I would like to know is, if you did get in the Senate, you were born in regional New South Wales, I believe in Tamworth. What do you feel is the most you could do to help regional New South Wales?
Okay, good question. I was actually born in South Australia, but yes, I grew up in Tamworth.
Okay.
Okay, and I very much feel like I'm a country boy who's visiting the city. I have been visiting it for 30 years. I hope to retire to this country one day, but look, while it may seem attractive to come out with a special plan for that part of Australia and another plan for that part of Australia, and something for the farmers and something for Western Australia and something for the miners. Okay, the truth is we need to have a completely level playing field. We need to have flat taxes. We have deregulation. We need to have a booming private sector. And under that situation, when we're not playing favourites, I mean, I know some people go say, well, we should have a special taxation zone over here. We should do something special for the rural parts of Australia. No, level playing field. And a booming private sector economy, and that's going to be while it may not sound that attractive to people in the country, the truth is it's the very best policy for people in the country and the city and everywhere in between.
But how about where there's no doctors? Like, do you have a plan? Like, did you like our plan? Did you like it? And what would you do to help? Aged care facilities are shutting down.
Well, look, I have lived, for 2 years after I left school, I lived in a tiny little town and we used to have a lot of difficulty with a doctor. We really believe in a much more privately funded healthcare system, okay? And so, if people are going to go and live in remote areas, they can't demand that the government goes and give them all those services. There's got to be an incentive for why they've gone and lived in a remote area. And there will be, and will obviously be financial or some other reason. Now there are going to be some downsides and they've got to balance those things up, okay? And that is an individual choice.
To not have a doctor and not have an aged care facility.
Well, look, if I want to go and live in the middle of the South Australian desert, do I then say, oh, the government's being unfair, they haven't given me a doctor 2 minutes away?
Oh, I guess fair enough. Just there's so many regional towns.
Well then, look, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. And all these good ideas with good intentions, it all comes down to, I want to take more money off the productive people, give it to the government, and then I want the government to go and spend it on some special program.
Sorry, who's a socialist?
I do like that now we've got two socialists.
Okay.
See, no one can say that Rebel News and Rural Rukshan are not balanced. We have the extreme right wing here and the socialists.
I'm not accusing anyone of being. I'm not accusing you of being a socialist with a capital S. But whenever somebody comes up with more ideas to spend more government money, that is a socialist initiative.
No, it's just they've paid their taxes for that. They've paid their rates. You know how government works from local government all the way up. They've paid taxes, paid rates, everything else. They live in a country town, in a community, and that is and the Murray-Darling Basin is supporting not just Australia in food. It's worth $24 billion in food and fibre. Our tourism is worth $13 billion. It's a big economy, and in those towns, they're turning into ghost towns because
we'll give him one last chance to answer that.
Every single issue, every single individual in Australia can come up with a good idea, a good case for why the government should give my pet project more money. Everyone can do it. People say, oh, teachers are so overworked, nurses are so overworked, the mining industry needs this, okay, the army's underpaid. Everyone can come up with something, we need more research and development into science or whatever, global warming. Everyone says, I want more money from the government. No, look, we've got to accept we need a smaller government, we need the private sector to fund these things, and the only way to do that is to have a low, flat tax, a deregulated economy. This is the only system that's worked across human history. When we try to meddle with the economy, meddle with the free market, we end up with more human suffering.
Well, I was going to ask my question of John, but you've had two questions, so I'll have to...
Thank you.
John looks like he's having fun with it.
He loves questions.
Well, the question I was going to ask, but I'll ask you just to have some diversity here.
Yes.
What would be your policy on childhood vaccinations? Would you be prepared to investigate, because we could give you access to tens of thousands of Australian families that have children who they claim were injured by vaccine, and they are completely unheard, and they have been unheard for decades. What would be your, what nation address
it's already, that? Actually, Pauline has already spoken about this a couple of years ago. She went into, I was on one of the shows, I think Current Affair or something it was on, I know I did see it, but look, it's a subject that has to be investigated, and that's what it's about. I'll be honest, my children had all their early vaccinations, in life when they were born. They had them.
Yep.
Okay. They're all grown up
and
adults now.
And that was
we are for pro-choice. And that is our policy, pro-choice. But that's the whole idea of going into the Senate, to listen to other people's ideas. We want a public, referenda, people to be able to come forward and put this to us. Okay, you give me your investigation and we will look at it and look at what information you have, because there's a lot of things out there, and that's what went wrong with COVID, the mandates. There's no legal responsibility from the actual manufacturers on these vaccines. To me, that's point blank. How can you trust it if you're not willing to be responsible for what you've created? How can you believe in it?
Okay.
No liability. So yes, we would talk, we would go through all the information you have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question for Michael. It's not a gotcha question, it's a genuine question.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
I appreciate your genuine question.
So like Kate, when my kids were born, the doctor says, here's the vaccines. Didn't think about it. Did not think about it, okay? COVID comes along, and I see all this pressure and coercion and all these manipulation from the government and Big Pharma, And I thought, I haven't taken the vaccine, okay, and I thought, okay, well, I'd never thought about vaccines before, and now I am thinking about vaccines. I've read Robert Kennedy's book, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I mean, this is a subject which should be treated respectfully. This is a debate. Could be possible you're completely wrong, but I want you to be treated fairly. And you may well be right, and if you're right, it's pretty scary about all these vaccines. We're over-vaxxed, okay? But tell me, if you were the dictator for one day,
Yes.
you could change the law permanently in Australia. I've read your website. There's a lot of things I had not thought about in there. But I know what's in your heart. All the IMOP people I meet are magnificent people, and they all, like you, look healthy. So they're onto something, okay? If you're the dictator for one day, out of all the policies you've got there, which is the one that you would say, and that's the one that we would say that we're going to change Australian law on?
Oh dear, there's some choice ones there. I think it would have to be, it would be around vaccine, that we would, a full investigation, I'm coupling a couple of them, that we would like, I suppose, if I could have one, liability on all vaccine industry. That liability goes back to the companies that produce them, so that the average Australian can sue that company if they get a faulty...
If they get injured.
Yes,
yes.
Well, I just want to thank you all again for coming down to Melbourne from, New South Wales, and really appreciate the time that you've taken today to discuss these topics amongst yourselves and with the audience that are watching. I like the idea of, me and Avi running ABC, because I think you'd see more of these types of debates. And I think
you know who to vote for.
That's right. Because I think it's so important that the public is actually exposed to the ideas that the minor parties and independents are bringing. And again, like I said yesterday, it's a shame that these things aren't being discussed more openly amongst everyone. And Avi?
Thank you guys for coming. Thank you to Rukshan for being the awesome calm moderator we need when we have socialists and extreme right-wing, you know what I'm talking about. And thank you to the viewers at home that are watching this. And unfortunately, it's left to us to be doing this, and to you guys at home to be sharing it. Not just for the debate, but also so people see the faces that they probably haven't even seen throughout this campaign. So it's up to you guys at home to share it. And if you want to support what we're doing here, ozdecides.com, you can donate there, or you can also check out all the reports and all the candidates that we've given a platform in this period. ozdecides.com. Thank you guys.
Avi?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Good on you, mate. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks very much. That was good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great.